There is a difference between silence that surrenders and silence that trusts. One comes from fear, the fear of conflict, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of what will happen if you do not defend yourself. It is the silence of a person who has nothing to say because they believe nothing they say will matter. The other comes from faith, from the settled conviction that there is a God who sees what people do in the dark, who records what is spoken about you behind your back, who is neither slow nor forgetful when it comes to justice, and who has in his wisdom asked you to stand still in certain moments so that he can do what only he can do. Romans 12 verse 19. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Leave room. That phrase carries more weight than most people give it. When you respond, when you retaliate, when you explain yourself to the wrong person, when you react from the wound rather than from wisdom, you occupy the space where God was going to move. You step into a role that was not assigned to you, and in doing so you step out of the position of trust that was. Silence in the right moment, in the right situation, is not weakness. It is an act of faith. It is the practical expression of trusting that God is more just than your anger, more precise than your retaliation, and more effective at handling what was done to you than anything you could engineer in response. Today I want to walk you through 7 specific situations where staying silent and letting God handle it is not passivity, it is wisdom. Not because you have nothing to say, but because God has more to say than you do, and he says it in ways that no human response can replicate. Stay with me. There are people who do not come to understand you, they come to disturb you. The poke is deliberate, the jab is calculated, the comment that seemed casual but landed with precision that was not accidental. They are not provoking you because they are strong. They are provoking you because they are looking for something, your frustration, your outburst, your loss of composure, and they have learned that the fastest way to get it is to push. And the moment you react, you give them exactly what they came for. Proverbs 26 verse 4. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. That verse is not an insult to the provocateur, it is a warning to you. Because when you step into the emotional register, that provocation is designed to produce the anger, the defense, the desperate need to be understood by someone who had no intention of understanding you. You do not win the exchange, you become the exchange. You become the spectacle the provocation was designed to create. The person who provokes you is making a bet. They are betting that your emotions are more accessible than your discipline, that your need to be vindicated is stronger than your trust in the God who vindicates, that you would take the bet because most people do. Silence refuses the bet. When you stay calm, not cold, not indifferent, but genuinely unbothered, you communicate something that no argument could deliver. You are not available for this, not because you have nothing to say, because what you have to say is worth more than this audience. And then God handles the rest. Galatians 6 verse 7. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. People who make a pattern of provoking others for sport, who derive their energy from the disruption of other people's peace, sow that seed into every relationship they have, and the harvest of it comes back to them in ways that your reaction never could have produced. Credibility lost one jab at a time. Relationships that thin because people eventually recognize the pattern. Rooms they stop being invited into because their presence has become synonymous with unease. You do not have to deliver that consequence. You just have to refuse to be part of it and let God's law of sowing and reaping do what it always does without your assistance. Next time someone pushes your buttons, pause, breathe, and let the absence of your reaction be the loudest response you have ever given. You can feel the difference immediately. There are conversations that bring clarity where both people want to understand, where honesty is received, where the exchange leaves both parties lighter than when it began. And there are conversations designed to drain you, where the other person is not listening to understand but waiting to respond, not seeking truth but seeking advantage, not interested in your heart but committed to their narrative. In the first kind of conversation, explanation is wisdom. In the second, it is fuel on a fire you did not start. Proverbs 9 verse 8. Do not rebuke a mocker or he will hate you. The mocker in this verse is not necessarily a dramatic enemy. They are simply a person who has already decided what they think about you and who is not in the conversation to revise that decision but to reinforce it. Every word you offer in your defense becomes material. They reshape into a version of you they already decided to see. Every clarification becomes a new angle. Every explanation becomes more evidence for the case they built before you opened your mouth. The more you explain, the deeper you go into their narrative. And the way out is not through more explanation. It is through silence, through the refusal to keep adding material to a case that was never built for your acquittal. This is what Jesus modeled before Pilate. Matthew 27 verse 14. But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. The governor was amazed because no one stays silent when they can defend themselves. Unless they understand something about the court, they are standing in that the court itself does not understand. Jesus knew that Pilate's verdict was already written by forces beyond the trial room, and that spending the truth of his words on a proceeding whose outcome he could not change was not wisdom, it was waste. Sometimes the trial you are in has already been decided by God, and the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to change the verdict in the room and trust the one who presides over the court that matters. Let your actions speak. Let your consistency be the argument. Let your character be the evidence, and let God be the one who in his time makes the truth sound deniable, that your explanation becomes unnecessary. Public disrespect carries a specific kind of sting. It is not just the insult, it is the audience, the fact that others witnessed it, that the mockery, the dismissal, the sarcastic remark was delivered in front of people whose perception of you now carries the weight of what was just said. And every instinct in you wants to restore your dignity on the spot, to fire back, to prove that you are not what they just implied, to reclaim the narrative before it settles. But impulsive reaction in public rarely restores dignity. More often, it transfers it. The moment you respond from emotion, from the wound, from the urgent need to be seen as the one who is right, the attention shifts from their behavior to yours. Suddenly the conversation is about how you reacted, not about what was done to you. The disrespect gets buried in the noise of the response, and the person who came to diminish you has achieved their objective, not because they won an argument, but because they got you to step out of character. 1 Samuel 24 is one of the most instructive passages in all of scripture on this specific situation. David is hiding in a cave from Saul the king, who has been publicly humiliating him, pursuing him, treating him as a criminal despite his innocence. Saul enters the very cave where David is hiding. David's men tell him, God has delivered your enemy into your hands. This is your moment. Do something, say something, react. David cuts off a corner of Saul's robe in secret and then feels guilty even for that. He does not confront Saul in the cave. He waits until Saul is outside, calls out to him respectfully, bows before him, and makes his case with composure, not from anger but from dignity. And Saul weeps, not because David overpowered him, because David's restraint and grace communicated something that aggression never could have. Your composure in the face of public disrespect is more powerful than your rebuttal, because a person who can be publicly diminished and remain publicly dignified is demonstrating a quality of character that the audience will remember long after the insult is forgotten. You do not need to win the moment. You need to win the witness, and witnesses are won by grace, not by aggression. Stay calm, stay composed. Let the weight of their behavior settle on them in front of the same audience they chose without your help, and let God be the one who ensures that what was done to you publicly is answered in a way that no private retaliation could have produced. Few things are more mentally exhausting than this. You say something honest, something clear, something that was offered in good faith, and minutes later or days later it returns to you in a form you do not recognize, reshaped, reframed, attached to intentions you never had and motives you never carried. And suddenly you are defending a version of yourself that you did not create and cannot fully dismantle, because the distortion is not based on what you said but on what someone decided you meant. And your first instinct is to correct it, to clarify, to slow down and go back to the original words and show point by point where the distortion happened and what the truth actually was. And so you explain, and the explanation gets twisted too. And you explain the explanation, and that gets twisted. And you find yourself sinking deeper into a narrative that was never built for your vindication, because the person building it is not interested in accuracy. They are interested in advantage. Here is what I want you to understand about this situation. A person who twists your words is not confused. They are not missing information. They are not struggling with comprehension. They are making a deliberate choice to take what you offered in good faith and reshape it into something that serves their purpose. And the more you engage, the more material you give them to work with. Silence removes the raw material. When you stop clarifying, stop justifying, stop trying to correct every distortion as it surfaces, you deny the process, the fuel it requires to continue. The distortion has to survive on its own now, unsupported by your engagement, unenriched by your additional words and distortions, without fresh material, eventually collapse under the weight of their own inconsistency. Isaiah 54 verse 17. No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Refute not by argument but by heritage, by the consistent demonstration of who you actually are against the distorted version someone else constructed. Time is the refutation. Character is the refutation. The consistency of your life over months and years, observable, undeniable, unrewritable, is the evidence that dismantles the distortion without you having to fight for every word. Let God be the refutation. Stop feeding the distortion with your engagement and trust that what you actually are will eventually be more visible than what someone else decided you were. This one carries a specific kind of pain. Not the pain of being misunderstood in a conversation, the pain of discovering that someone has been speaking about you to people you know, in spaces you were not in, with a version of you that bears no resemblance to who you actually are. And there each of it, the way it traveled, the people who received it, the assumptions it planted, feels like something that must be addressed urgently before it does more damage. And so your instinct is to chase it, to reach each person it touched and correct the record, to confront the source and demand accountability, to prove comprehensively, publicly, with enough evidence that nobody could question it, that what was said was false. But here is what chasing a rumor actually does. It gives it legs. The moment you begin defending yourself against something that most people had not yet fully believed, you confirm that there is something worth defending against. The most you would have had to do in most cases is exist as yourself consistently, visibly, undeniably, and the rumor would have eventually suffocated under the weight of the evidence your life provides daily. But the moment you chase it, you elevate it, you make it news, you make it a story worth following. Nehemiah chapter 6, his enemies spread a rumor that he was building the wall in order to make himself king. A politically dangerous accusation, potentially life-threatening. And Nehemiah's response: nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. And then he prayed and went back to the wall. One statement, one prayer, back to the work. He did not launch an investigation. He did not tour the city correcting every person who had had the lie. He named it briefly, gave it to God, and returned to what was called to do, trusting that the completion of the wall would be a more effective rebuttal than any campaign of self-defense he could have mounted. And the wall was completed in 52 days. The work answered the accusation. The fruit silenced the fabrication. And God ensured that what was spoken against Nehemiah in those 6 chapters left no permanent mark on his name, because the integrity of what he built made the rumors irrelevant. Your consistency is the correction. Your character is the rebuttal. And God is the vindicator, more thorough than you, more patient than you, and more precise than any argument you could have made. Stay on the wall. Let God handle the noise. This is the one that requires the most tenderness, because this is not about an adversary. This is about someone you valued, a friend who grew distant, a partner who lost interest, a family member who pulled back, a person whose presence in your life felt like a given and whose absence feels like a subtraction you did not consent to. And the instinct is not to retaliate, it is to chase, to call, to explain, to ask what changed, to offer more of yourself in the hope that more will be enough to make them stay. I want to say something before I say anything else. The grief of a departure is real, and it deserves to be honored before it is reframed. The person who left their absence cost something. The relationship that changed, the change carried genuine loss, and moving too quickly to a theological principle before the grief has been acknowledged is not faith, it is avoidance. So let me say clearly, you are allowed to feel this. You are allowed to grieve the departure of someone you loved and needed and expected to stay. And then after the grief has been honored, I want to show you something. John 11, Mary and Martha send word to Jesus that Lazarus is sick. Lord, the one you love is sick. And the text says, when Jesus heard this, he stayed where he was 2 more days. He did not come when they called. He did not arrive in the window where his presence would have prevented the death. He came late by every human calculation. And when he arrived, Martha met him with the grief of someone who had needed him and had not had him when she needed him most. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus did not dispute the delay. He wept with her in it. And then he reversed what the delay had allowed, not despite the delay, but through it producing a testimony so undeniable that it became one of the most documented miracles in the Gospels. Some of the departures in your life are not God's abandonment of your story. They are God repositioning it, removing from the immediate circle what was not assigned to the next chapter, so that what comes next can arrive into a space that was cleared rather than cluttered. And the impulse to chase what left, to fill the space immediately, to beg for the return of what was removed, is the impulse that prevents the next chapter from finding room. Stay silent in the departure, not because you do not care, because you trust the God who sees every relationship in your life with more clarity than either party involved, who knows what the space is being cleared for, who is not surprised by the departure even when you are, and who has a habit documented across scripture of replacing what was removed with something more aligned, more permanent, more suited to the season you are actually entering. Do not chase what God released. Trust that what belongs to your next chapter will find you in the space the departure created. I want to end here because this is the heaviest situation, the one that carries the most weight, and the one where the theological difference between karma and God matters the most. Karma says what goes around comes around. It is impersonal, mechanical, a law of the universe that operates indifferently, without relationship, without love, without the specific knowledge of what was actually done and what it actually cost you. God's justice is different. Romans 12 verse 19. It is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Mine, personal, relational. The God who says I will repay is not an impersonal force administering a universal law. He is a father who saw what was done to his child, a judge who was present at the crime, a vindicator who does not forget and does not make mistakes and does not deliver consequences that overcorrect or undercorrect, but who repays with a precision that only omniscience makes possible. This is why revenge is not just wrong, it is an insult to God's capability. When you take revenge, when you engineer the exposure, orchestrate the humiliation, ensure that what was done to you is repaid through your hand, you are essentially saying, I do not trust God to handle this. I do not believe he will move. I do not have faith that his justice is real enough or timely enough or precise enough for what happened to me, so I will do it myself. And you step into a role that was not given to you, with tools you do not have, with information that is incomplete, with emotions that distort the precision the moment requires. And the result is almost always the same. You damage yourself in the execution, you compromise your integrity in the delivery, and you received none of the peace you were promised, because the peace was never in the retaliation, it was in the release. Joseph, standing before the brothers who threw him in a pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver, had every human justification for revenge. He was the second most powerful man in Egypt. They were at his mercy. He held every resource they needed to survive. He could have paid back every year of suffering with interest in a single afternoon. And he wept. And he said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Not, I forgive you, even though what you did was fine. Not, the suffering did not matter. Not, I have no feelings about 13 years of injustice. But the God who saw it all had a purpose in it that exceeded the pain of it. And I am not willing to reduce what God built through this story to the small satisfaction of repaying you for your part in it. That is not weakness. That is the most powerful thing a human being can do, to hold the capacity for revenge and choose trust instead. To look at the person who wronged you and choose to leave the accounting to the God who does not miss a single entry in the ledger. To say, I release this, not because what happened was acceptable, but because I trust the one who calls himself just more than I trust my own ability to deliver justice. Leave room for God's wrath, because God's wrath is not what most people imagine. It is not explosive or indiscriminate. It is precise, surgical, timed to the exact moment where it will produce the most complete result. Both the consequence and the person who wronged you needs to experience, and the testimony your restraint produces for everyone watching. Let it go. Not because what happened did not matter, it did. Not because God is slow, he is not. But because the hands you are placing it in are more capable than yours, and what he does with it will be greater than anything you could have engineered from the wound. 7 situations, one thread running through all of them. God is not slow. God is not absent. God is not indifferent to what was done to you, said about you, taken from you, or withheld from you. He sees it, he records it, and he has reserved the right to respond to it in ways that exceed what your reaction could ever produce. Your silence in these 7 situations is not surrender. It is the practical expression of a theological conviction that the God who said, I will repay, is more capable of repaying than you are, more informed about what repayment looks like, and more precise in its delivery. That the God who said, now we are formed against you shall prosper, is active in that promise, not passive, not waiting for your permission, not requiring your assistance to make it true. Your job is to stand still, to guard your peace, to protect your character from the corruption that retaliation and bitterness and the exhausting cycle of explanation always produce. To remain the person God called you to be, even when what was done to you makes staying that person the hardest thing available. Exodus 14 verse 14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. That word still is not passive. In the original Hebrew, it means to be quiet, to cease striving, to release the fight to the one who is more equipped for it. It is an active choice, a faith decision, the decision to stop occupying the space where God was going to move and let him move. Be still in the provocation. Be still when the explanation would only make things worse. Be still when the disrespect comes in public. Be still when the words are twisted. Be still when the lies are spreading. Be still when someone walks away. and be still, especially when revenge feels like the only justice available, because the Lord will fight for you, and he fights better than you do.